For years now, I've been looking for something, but it was only in preparing for this podcast episode that I even realized I was looking for it at all. I have a feeling I'm not the only person who's been unknowingly searching for it either. There are probably some out there who are searching for it. They know they're searching for it, but they aren't quite sure what it looks like anymore. Community. Not in the big, glossy, polished social media way. Not in the let's all gather around and say the right things way. I mean the real thing, the quiet thing, the thing that makes you exhale when you walk into a room and realize, oh, I can be myself here. Because if I'm being honest with you, I think a lot of us are walking around surrounded by people and still feel oddly alone. And maybe that's because we've gotten used to calling a lot of things community that aren't really community, not in the sense we truly crave. Maybe they're just spaces, memberships, groups, places where people gather. But gathering and belonging are not always the same thing. And that's what I want to talk about today, because I think we're missing each other. Welcome back to Being Human on Purpose. I'm glad you're here. I think we're missing each other. Not always in the dramatic sense, not always in some huge, obvious, hard to ignore way. Sometimes we're missing each other in the small ways, the ways that matter, the ways that quietly shape whether somebody feels seen or invisible, known or overlooked, held or left to figure it out alone. I mentioned that I've been searching for community for goodness, I would say well over a decade now. My search has led me to attempting to start my own communities through Facebook groups, employee networks, employee giving campaigns, all a search for my people. And I won't say that I haven't found some communities along the way, found that belonging. I have, and I'm grateful for it and consider myself blessed. But for one reason or another, either they didn't work out or that part of my story ended. And so I move on. But over the last several months, community has been popping up over and over and over. This podcast is a result of that. And just about the same time I decided to start this podcast, I got an email from an organization called Idealist. They're a global organization that connects individuals with nonprofits for volunteer work and social impact careers. I've been receiving their emails now for several years. So it wasn't anything unusual. This particular email was a little bit different. It came from Ami Dar. He's the founder and executive director of Idealist. In his email, he included a video from a speaking engagement where he had shared a dream that he had had for decades, a dream that was finally taking shape. It's now become something called Idealist Days. Basically, it's a global invitation to stop overthinking doing good and actually do something about it together regularly. All I could think when I was watching Ami's video was, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. I never got any traction with the things that I've tried in the past. But here was a leader of a global organization making it happen. I wanted in immediately. So here's what's happening. On May 5th, Idealist Days officially kicks off. 5-5. There are people from all over the world coming together for a global community breakfast. People are encouraged to gather in their own neighborhoods, their own towns, their own corners of the world, just for breakfast. Ami, who is based in New York City, is going to lead a group across the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise and have coffee and breakfast on the other side. Now, me being me, my brain went from 0 to 60 with ideas instantly. I started thinking about community in the neighborhood sense, in the human sense, in the global sense. I started thinking about what would happen if we all just started where we are, right where we are, and built something real in our own corners of the world. What would happen if we stopped waiting for the world to change and started with our own street, our own block, our own home, our own conversations? Because change doesn't usually arrive all at once. It usually starts small. One person, one conversation, one act of kindness, one moment where somebody decides, I'm going to show up differently here. And that's how things ripple. That's how things spread. That's how a neighborhood becomes more than a neighborhood. A group becomes a community. A community becomes a force. So what did I decide to do? I'm going to set up a table in my driveway. Coffee, donuts, and an invitation for my neighbors to just stop by and say hi. To maximize the impact we can make together, I'll be collecting donations for a local nonprofit that helps individuals and families right here in our own community. That's it. Nothing fancy, nothing loud. The next month, we'll do something out in the community. The month after that, maybe we'll gather with other communities. And the ripple continues from there. Because that's how real change happens. The ripples of a single pebble can travel far. Even when you can no longer see the ripple, the movement below the surface continues to be felt. As the theme of community kept popping up and I started planning this event for Idealist Days, I couldn't help but think about the neighborhood I grew up in. When I was growing up in the 80s, my situation was a little more complicated than most kids, though honestly, I think we see it a little bit more commonly now. My parents separated when I was only a year and a half old, and I stayed with my dad, who relied heavily on my grandparents to help raise me. I spent most of my time at their house. They lived in a townhouse neighborhood, and once or twice a year, there would be a neighborhood cleanup. It was an all-out event. Now, being honest here, I was in it for the soda. Every bag of trash brought to the collection area would earn a bottle of soda, and one year I earned an entire six-pack. But everyone came out. Everyone showed up. Everyone participated. Fast forward to today, I'm not in the same neighborhood, but we do have a cleanup. It's monthly. And there's only a handful of people that show up to it. If you don't even know what's going on, you'd miss it completely. I think about the differences. And I don't think it's that people stopped caring. I think it's that the invitation got quieter. The energy got smaller. The moment of belonging, that collective showing up, faded. Community can show up in all shapes and sizes. It can be momentary, but the key ingredient is always the same: belonging. That feeling of, I'm a part of something here. Another very relevant community theme that, okay, this one didn't pop up. This one actually was planned for almost an entire year. A friend of mine and we traveled to Round Rock, Texas last month to attend David Bayer's Powerful Living Experience. Now that was community. Not because everybody there was perfect, not because everyone agreed on everything, or because it was some magical little bubble where life suddenly all made sense. It was community because the people were there on purpose. They were there because they wanted to grow. They wanted to change. They were there because they understood something that I think we forget too easily. We're not meant to do life alone. Even someone who is perfectly happy being introverted, even someone who genuinely loves their solitude, will experience something deeply powerful about being in a room full of people who are all saying in their own way, I'm here to become more of who I really am. That does something to you. It softens you and strengthens you at the same time. It reminds you that growth is not just a private experience. Sometimes growth gets amplified when it happens in the presence of other people who are also reaching, also building, also becoming. That's when the magic of belonging really comes alive. Something I find really beautiful is when you see community come alive in other species on our planet. Have you seen that video that's going viral on social media right now of a sperm whale giving birth? In the video, she's surrounded, I mean, surrounded by generations of females and at least one juvenile male, I believe. They were all protecting her calf, keeping her calf above water at the surface. They were working together tirelessly to keep the newborn there until it could breathe and swim on its own. We're talking hours. Researchers are saying that this is one of the first times an event like this has been fully documented with sperm whales. What really hit me was that's community, purely instinctive. No committee, no strategy meeting, no branding plan. They just showed up for one another. And they're not the only animals to demonstrate this. Elephants do it, primates, apes, they do it, and so many others. That kind of pure instinctive, we take care of each other behavior, it moves me every time. Because nobody had to explain what to do. Nobody had to make a speech. They just showed up. And I think that's what we crave most. Not just people around us, not just activity or access. We crave to be known. We crave to be seen without having to earn it. We crave to be in spaces where we don't have to constantly translate ourselves. That's what belonging feels like. Something that kind of anchors in why I feel like we've kind of lost sight of what community really is. A story that came to mind for me when I was thinking about this several years ago now, when my boys were teenagers. I think I was driving them and a friend or two somewhere. And I don't remember the conversation. They were talking and I was just, playing chauffeur. But somebody said my mom's not a feminist. And right then and there, I had to say, actually, I am. Not to make a statement or to turn it into a lecture or anything like that. It was because I realized that they were thinking of feminism as the loudest version of feminism they'd ever seen, the most public, the most obvious. And they didn't see me in that version. But that didn't mean I didn't believe in equal rights. It didn't mean I didn't believe in fairness or dignity and respect for all people. It just meant I wasn't expressing it in the loudest way. And that's when it hit me. Sometimes people don't reject the value. They just don't recognize themselves in the packaging. And I think that happens with community too. We think if something isn't loud, visible, and constantly announcing itself, it must not be real. It must not count. But that's not true. Some of the deepest things in life are quiet. Love can be quiet. Trust, healing, and community can be quiet too. That doesn't make it weak. It makes it rooted. And though communities can come together to create change, they can't come together with the intention of trying to change people. We can't. Change comes from within, always. But communities can influence. We can create space and offer perspective. Because when you give someone room to understand without feeling forced, then you give them room to grow, to expand. And that's when real change happens. And hey, I say all of this, but I'll be the first to admit that I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect at doing this. I still catch myself being judgy sometimes, and I even catch myself being unkind. In those moments, all I can do is notice, reflect, and come back to intention because I'm only human, just like you. So let's get really honest for a second. Not every space you're in is your community. And that's not a failure. That's just the truth. Sometimes a gym is just a gym. Sometimes an office is just an office. Sometimes a church is just a building. Sometimes a group chat is just noise. And sometimes, in the middle of all of that, you find the people who are really yours. The ones who feel like home. The ones who don't make you perform for the privilege of being included. The ones who make you feel like you can just be a human being, messy, complicated, and real, and still be welcome. And when you find those people, something inside you settles. You stop scanning the room quite so hard. You stop editing every sentence before you say it. You stop wondering if you're too much or not enough. You just arrive. That kind of belonging changes people because once you know what it feels like, you start noticing where it's missing. And maybe that's part of the point. Maybe we're not supposed to keep pretending every space is ours. Maybe we're supposed to get honest about where we feel seen, where we feel safe, where we feel expanded, and where we don't. And then maybe, just maybe, we start building from there. But keep in mind that community is a two-way street. It isn't just about asking, do I feel like I belong? But it's also a matter of asking, how do I show up? Am I open? Am I present? Am I willing to be seen? Even just a little? Sometimes that can be the hardest part. But belonging isn't just something that we receive. It's something we co-create. Something we have to hold on to as we think about all of this. Being human isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. Just because you walk into a room and don't feel like you fit doesn't mean the room is wrong. It just means it isn't your room. The same is true in reverse. When someone walks into your space and doesn't seem to fit, that doesn't mean they're wrong either. You can be welcoming and inclusive and warm and still not be someone's fit. And you can be completely welcomed somewhere and still know in your gut it's not for you. Both things are true. Both are okay. The goal isn't to force everyone into one giant room and call it connection. The goal is to help people find where they actually belong and then connect those places in a real way. Because if you can find your place in a smaller circle, you start to understand how that smaller circle belongs in the bigger one. That's how this grows. I keep coming back to the idea of a global community, and I know that might sound lofty or even naive. But here's what I actually believe. I don't think we all need to agree. We won't. I don't think we all want the same things in the exact same way. I guarantee we don't. But I believe that people everywhere are longing for the same basic human experience to matter, to belong, to feel like their life counts, to know they're not invisible. And if enough of us start creating that in our own spaces, at the neighborhood level, at the city level, at the country level, at the human level, something shifts. I know that sounds idealistic, but I actually think idealism is just realism that hasn't been worn down yet. It's looking at the world and saying, this is not the best we can do, and then choosing to do something about it anyway. Even if it's small, especially if it's small, because small is where it starts. Small is where someone learns your name. Small is where trust forms. Small is where a lonely person starts to feel less alone. Small is where community begins to become real. And the beautiful thing about small, it scales. One person starts paying attention, then another. One person starts checking in, then another. One person starts making room, then another. And suddenly, what looked like nothing much is actually the beginning of something strong, something alive, something that can hold weight, something that can carry people through hard seasons. That's what I want for us. Not just more noise, not just more crowds, not just more labels. I want more spaces where people can actually be known. So this week, I have one ask. Instead of asking, where can I fit in? Ask yourself, where do I feel most like myself? And maybe, even more importantly, where can I help someone else feel that way too? Because that might be the real beginning of community. Not a perfect system, not a perfect group, not a perfect world. Just a few people choosing to be present enough to make belonging possible. So here's where I want to leave us today. When was the last time you truly felt like you belonged somewhere? Not just included or invited or tolerated, but actually belonged. Sit with that for a second because your answer says a lot. And maybe, if it's been a while, that's not a sign something's wrong with you. Maybe it's a sign that you've been living in spaces that were never meant to hold your whole heart. And maybe this is your invitation to pay attention, to notice, to get honest, to stop calling every room community just because people are in it, and to start looking for the places where your soul actually softens, where your shoulders drop, where something in you says, yes, here. Those places matter. Those people matter. That feeling matters. Maybe we're not missing community at all. Maybe we're just being invited to remember how to belong. Being human on purpose means choosing to see each other. Not perfectly, not all the time, but enough. Enough to change the temperature in a room. Enough to help someone breathe easier. Enough to remind someone they're not alone. And that's not small. That's everything. Until next week, be a little more human, a little more on purpose. All my love.